Road accident funds, different kind of acts applying to those contingency fees. Those are just some of the terms we've been talking to Michael de Broglio from Broglio Inc. about over the past few weeks, getting to know about these legal terms and what they entail. And he joins us again this morning to give us some more insight into the legal world. Good to have you back. How are you?
Good morning. Great to be here.
Very, very good. Now, today's case relates to personal injury. I know that last week we spoke about the difference between road accident fund claims and personal injury claims. So what is personal injury?
Personal injury would be matters where you've been injured through no fault of your own. Somebody else is to blame and you've been injured and suffered a loss of income, suffered some sort of injury as a result. That could include cases, for example, a dog bite case is quite common, a slip and fall in a parking lot, in a supermarket, something like that. A medical negligence case where you operated on incorrectly or something goes wrong with the operation. So it would involve train accidents where people are injured as well. But basically any other case that's not against the road accident fund that comes from motor accident.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking about medical negligence, what does that entail?
Medical negligence would basically be that you go along to a doctor to be treated, to make you better, sort out a problem, and in fact, instead of that happening, things go wrong and you end up in a worse situation, and they do something that they shouldn't have done that leads to you suffering consequences, sometimes an amputation as bad as that, but that's what medical negligence would be.
So have you actually handled a case like that?
Yeah, in fact, I've recently just finished one involving a state hospital and a client of mine who didn't have medical aid, had to be taken to a state hospital for a fracture he sustained when he fell off a ladder. Something as simple as that, had to have his foot put into plaster, drains inserted, and unfortunately one of them was left in his leg. It led to an infection. After some period of time, in fact, he had to have his leg amputated. And as a result of that, he also lost his job. So something small leads to something big, leads to changing an entire person's life. And that's where we as the lawyers step in. We firstly proved the negligence of the hospital, and then in a separate trial later have dealt with the quantum, in other words, what the case is worth. And there we're dealing with putting you back in the position you would have been but for the accident. You know, our law is different to American law. We don't punish the wrongdoer. We don't reward you for something bad happening to you, but we put you back as you would have been but for that accident.
Restoring the status quo, as they say.
Absolutely.
So when it comes to doing that, proving that the person who is affected or who is the victim in this case is unable to work as a result of that, how do you go about doing that? Do doctors have to come into play? How do you do that?
Absolutely. And that's again why you need lawyers in cases like that, because a lawyer would have access to the leading specialists who can detail in very detailed medico-legal reports, firstly, what was done wrong, because that's the first aspect of the case, and secondly, what are the consequences of what has happened. So in some cases, it might be as simple as an orthopedic surgeon, for example, saying this is the treatment that the person will need in future. These are the operations that the person will need. The cost of those operations in 10 years' time is 100,000. Then we get an actuary to quantify that. But it might involve plastic surgeons for scars. It would certainly involve occupational therapists for how does this relate to how you work and your home environment, industrial psychologists as to how your job has changed. In short, there's very few cases where you'd have less than 3 experts, and in some cases you'd have a whole lot more experts. In a case of a paraplegic, for example, you may well have to call in an architect to decide how must the person's house be modified, how must their car be changed, what type of things like that. And so there's a whole host of experts.
Wow, thank you very much. So as you can hear, there is a lot to consider, not just the experts, but the legal help that you need to get to that expert and how to work around all of these things. More information is, of course, on our website, and we'll be joined by Michael again next week. Stay with us on eXpresso.
Stay with eXpresso and SABC3.